The entrepreneurial spirit is an attitude that seeks out change rather than waiting to adapt to it. It's a mindset that embraces critical questioning, innovation, and continuous improvement. And in this Iowa entrepreneur story, the entrepreneurial spirit is something that runs in the family. We begin in Washington, Iowa, a town of over 7,000 people that has been listed in the 100 Best Small Towns in America by author Norman Crampton. Downtown Washington is made up of small stores and specialty shops. One of these shops is Reliant Long-Term Care Pharmacy, owned by Todd Thompson, who got his start in pharmaceuticals in the late 90s.
So I graduated pharmacy school in '98, worked for chains for about 6-7 years, the whole time with the intent to try and purchase some pharmacies on my own, get into my own business. Finally was able to do that in around 2005. We purchased our first pharmacy and we opened a small pharmacy same year. We've just kind of expanded from that very initial small hometown pharmacy.
With business going well, Todd expanded to more locations. Witnessing the business growth was Todd's stepson, Roby Miller, then a teenager that noticed firsthand what went into running a business.
I don't know if it was specific to the pharmacy business, but seeing someone that is an entrepreneur and seeing how many hours he had to work compared to a traditional job, it was interesting. It was more, it caught my attention by how much effort he was putting into making a business work, especially from the ground up as well too.
For 3 more years, Todd expanded his operations to include 6 pharmacies through either acquisitions or opening new stores. All was going well until 2010, when the pharmacies in Solon and Wellman, Iowa, became less financially viable. These stores had experienced reduced traffic because of the increasing popularity of mail-order pharmacies. Later that year, Todd made the difficult decision to close these locations.
It's one of those things that we knew for, well over a year. And you could see the writing on the wall because of reimbursement from insurance companies and volume and the impact of mail order pharmacies kind of taking a lot of customers away from the traditional store, which is just part of the business. It's how it goes. We saw the writing on the wall and you struggle with that, trying to figure out, we tried all kinds of alternative methods, trying to bring revenue into the stores. You cut payroll a little bit, but you create these relationships with community members and employees, and it's difficult, but it's just one of those things that we had to do in order to survive.
When the first one closed, it was actually a community that was very close to our home too, so it was a part of our community. And when we did close the store, a lot of people in the community were upset because it was a very important piece in the community. And so that's when I kind of realized that, the pharmacy is, an infrastructure for quality of life.
Todd and Roby kept looking for solutions. They found a business model that was being used in North Dakota called a telepharmacy and wondered if it would work in Iowa. A telepharmacy is like a regular pharmacy, except the pharmacist telecommutes in from a remote location. One pharmacist can provide patient consultations and prescription checks, just like before, but in multiple locations. It seemed to be the only viable option for smaller communities, but it had never been tried in Iowa. At that same time, Todd was approached by Victor, Iowa, a town of less than 900 people, to open a pharmacy in their community.
I might explain to them our situation in Solon and Wellman, and that a traditional pharmacy, there's no way that we could make it work. I had talked to the Board of Pharmacy and mentioned telepharmacy to them, and no one had tried it yet to that point. The rules were on the books, but no one had really attempted it. So I took that proposition to the Board of Pharmacy, asked them if we could give it a shot there, had kind of a general idea and roadmap of what we wanted to do, and they approved that. Then I went back and I was drawing up some ideas of how we do it and some rudimentary Skype technology, and realized Roby jumped in at that point, saw what I was doing, and just said he could do it much, much better than what we were doing.
Using the closing of the pharmacies in Solon and Wellman as motivation, Roby went to work determined to find a way to rebuild what he saw as a centerpiece for smaller communities. Roby didn't have a background in software development. He received his education from the University of Iowa and Stanford with a focus on entrepreneurship and project management. With these skills, he worked with his dad's pharmacy and 2 software developers to create the first version of the telepharmacy software.
So at nights we would build the software, and then I would take it into one of the pharmacies and show it to the technicians, pharmacists, get feedback from them, improve it, and keep doing that for about 3 months before we actually launched the software.
We took almost a year from that point on. Roby developed software in its earliest form for us. That would be the beta version, but he developed software for us to use and open that pharmacy in just a much safer, more efficient manner than what I would have done without him.
Roby's method was a safer method even compared to traditional pharmacies because it was a better documented process. The Iowa Pharmacy Board approved Todd and Roby for 5 locations that they could operate under a pilot program.
When I realized that you could open a store in a rural community and it was financially viable. So that was kind of the first step that, okay, this idea does work, the concept works.
The first store to operate with Roby software was one of Todd's, Victor Drug, in 2012. The pharmacy was a success, and word traveled fast throughout the industry.
When we opened that first store, I got multiple calls from different pharmacy owners who wanted to open telepharmacies. So I was super excited about that. I was like, wow, this is going to blow up. This is going to be a really big idea. And then 2 months later, we didn't get any phone calls. And so I was like, whoa, what's going on? I thought these people were going to come to me. But realizing you need a sales team, you need a whole staff. At the beginning, it was just myself, and it was not a scalable idea at the time.
Roby assembled his team and started the software company TelePharm in nearby Iowa City. Roby's software was quickly adopted in 8 telepharmacy locations, all within 5 months of the launch. Roby's company was expanding, and eventually it grew beyond the state borders into Illinois.
So from a regulatory standpoint, every state governs their own pharmacy laws. So every state that we go into, we have to comply with their rules, which makes it very difficult because if we had one set of rules for every single state, we'd be able to scale very quickly. And also our software could stay the same. So we have to make modifications for each state that we go into.
Now, more than 3 years after launching his software, Roby is still working with legislators to pass a bill that would allow telepharmacy in Iowa, and TelePharm to expand its business beyond the first 8 locations. Currently, the Iowa locations using his software are operating under a pilot program.
Being fairly naive in the first couple years, I actually went up to the state capitol and talked to legislators, pulled them out of session, told them what I'm doing, who I am, and they all loved it. They all loved the story and what we could do with it. But it passed through the Senate 100%, and we've had support from both sides of the aisle. So I don't think it's an issue for anyone. I think it was just the timing wasn't right.
With growth stalled in Iowa, Roby looked for more opportunities outside the state. In 2015, Roby purchased North Dakota-based telepharmacy Concepts and brought it under the TelePharm brand. Overnight, TelePharm grew to more than 100 pharmacies. Growing up, Roby saw firsthand what it was like to be an entrepreneur from his stepdad, Todd. Through some opportunities given to him from Todd, Roby is now an entrepreneur of his own.
I think I enjoy the risk more and that's why I was able to do this. I think if I was working a more traditional job, I'd be fairly bored, and this is much more exciting. And probably the best part for me too is building the team. They become very good friends, and I've hired a lot of my friends as well too. But building that and giving them an opportunity to grow in their career has been probably the best part for me. Every day is different, and you hit a lot of highs and you hit a lot of lows, and just to keep very even keel through the entire process is probably the skill that you need the most as an entrepreneur. Right now we're riding a high, so it's been fun, but talk to me in 2 months and I'll tell you how awful things are. On
the western edge of our great state is an area known as Loess Hills. These ancient hills were formed thousands of years ago by wind-blown topsoil and are 200 feet deep in some areas. The only other place in the world with this type of formation is Shanxi, China. The Loess Hills area includes the major cities of Council Bluffs and Sioux City. The hills are also the home of our next Iowa entrepreneur story, Loess Hills Lavender Farm. Owner Mary Hamer fell in love with lavender fields while on vacation with her husband Tim in 2005.
We went to Washington to visit our son, and they took us to Sequim, Washington, and that's where we saw lavender fields 30 times over. And of course in Sequim, it never really freezes there, so the lavender is about as tall as I am. I'm pretty short, but it's still pretty tall. But I just knew right away that I just loved it, and I had to do it in Iowa.
Living in Sheraton, Iowa at the time, Mary did a little research and started experimenting with growing lavender.
Right after we got home the next year, I ordered 25 plants, and they did beautiful all summer. And winter came on, and I really hadn't studied enough because I thought I really needed to protect them. So we put straw over them, and we killed all 25 plants. You really shouldn't try to protect your plants with anything that holds moisture. It'll hold too much moisture around the lavender, and it will kill it quicker than the cold.
With her first failed crop, Mary decided to do a little more research into growing lavender in the Midwest.
First, I tried a lot of the universities, and I pretty much got told that you can't grow lavender in the Midwest. And so I continued to research it, and I just kept thinking these Loess Hills is perfect for it.
Mary and Tim didn't live in the Loess Hills region, but they had grown up there, and it was a dream of theirs to move back. In 2008, Mary decided to turn her hobby into a business, and before they owned a single acre in western Iowa, she registered her business name, Loess Hills Lavender Farm.
I always wanted to come back to the hills. We just love these hills. It's this hill dirt gets in your blood, and there's just something about we always wanted to come back to the hills. We looked for 4 years. Since we lived over here, every time we came home, we'd be driving through the hills, trying to find that perfect spot. And it had to have a southwest facing valley, a north hill for a little protection, and it had to have a nice gentle slope so that we could plant the lavender on it. And so we looked at a lot of them, priced a lot of them, and it was out of our price range. My sister called me 2 weeks before the auction for this place, and we had 2 weeks to get our financing lined up, as well as I had to go to the auction by myself because Tim had to go to a business meeting.
Tim was disappointed that he couldn't make it to the land auction, and he was nervous with how much the land could sell for.
Nervous would be an understatement. However, I told her that if she decided to go above the figure that we had decided was our top, that she would have to go back to work to cash flow it. So I was reasonably certain that she wouldn't go far above that price.
There was a lot of farmers that were very interested in the properties. When it stopped at the price that we had set in our minds, I was very surprised. It should have went for, according to the realtor, $100,000 more. We decided it was time to come home.
So in 2009, they moved back to the Loess Hills. Tim continued to work full-time while they built the foundation for their lavender farm. They planted 1,200 sprouts with the help of their family and friends. The very first year at the new farm, Mary and Tim's focus was strictly getting their lavender plants in the Loess Hills soil to take off.
We pretty much were just working on our own. We weren't selling any products. It wasn't until it was the end of the first year that we took 25 plants that we had put in the ground that had just taken off and were just gorgeous, and we sold them at the Berry Farm Festival. That's just 8 miles from here. And we made our first $350. That was our income for that year off of the farm.
The Hamers had calculated that year 2 would be similar to the first year, as their lavender plants were still not fully mature.
We knew right away from the beginning that it was going to take probably 3 years before we saw a return, because it takes 3 years for the plants to mature. But it kind of took off on its own. The second year, we actually had people contact us, and we had 2 bus tours at the end of the season. And they had to sit out in our driveway, and we turned our garage into a little makeshift gift shop area and sold the products I just finally started making in the second year.
The Hamers hadn't planned on their farm being a tourist attraction, but after a few successful tours, they decided that this was one way they could diversify and market their product. With the help of a small business loan from the Harrison County REC, Mary and Tim went to work on their dirt floor machine shed.
We turned half the Morton building into a gift shop and presentation area. And from the year before, we had 2 bus tours with about 50 people on each bus. And the third year, we had over 843 people.
With a big year in 2011, the Hamers Lavender Farm was starting to make money. As their lavender plants were reaching full maturity, they were forecasting an even bigger profit.
It was just crazy, and it was a lot of fun, and we decided this was going just great. And then in 2014, the winter hit.
The Hamers lost nearly their entire crop.
Well, it was heartbreaking is what it was. I mean, we anticipated another great year, and as early spring turned into the middle of spring, when things start usually coming on, nothing happened. And it was probably the toughest 3 months that we've had in the business.
Lavender has always been very good in a drought situation. They can handle it very well, but we expected a little bit too much from the plants because they went into the winter after coming off the hard drought, and they really should have been watered really well that fall. And we watered some, but not good enough. Ground was still cracked, and then we had the 34 degrees below zero, wind chills, and no snow, and I knew we were in trouble. So then we pulled everything out in July and we started over.
In 2014, lavender was not considered an official crop in Iowa. That meant that no protection was available, including crop insurance. The Hamers would have to start over without any help.
Well, we were not considered a crop yet. So we did start pursuing that and contacting the various farm service agencies as well as representatives and the state and asking them to take this under consideration for the future.
The Lavender Farm's only source of income was now the gift shop.
We always knew we needed to be diversified, and so that's when we opened up this shop, we started allowing other people to come in and bring their products in to sell. I get 15% off of what they sell, and then making the lotions and the balms and spritzes, that's a nice income. So when the field was down, everything else was picking up.
Looking to bounce back and to continue to grow their business, Mary and Tim planted nearly twice as many plants.
We actually put in 3,000. We were determined to go big with the field, and we want to get to at least 5,000, hopefully by the end of this season. But another roadblock, we got 3,000 in. They were beautiful last summer. They were coming along great for new plants. Unfortunately, this spring, they just didn't want to wake up, and come to find out, the nursery had made a huge error in sending plants to us as well as other farmers in the Midwest. Their early cuttings that they sent out were the wrong ones, and they weren't strong enough for our winter. And so this spring we're planting again.
While their gift shop helps, not having mature lavender plants impacts their entire business. And without the assistance of crop insurance, the Loess Hills Lavender Farm has experienced financial strain.
What does hurt then is I am not able to distill my own oil to make my products. That's an added expense for me now the last 2 years. Then also, people aren't able to go up and cut their own bouquets, so that's a loss of income. And it's just things that you continue to realize how it has had that ripple effect.
Even though they have had some hard years, Mary and Tim continue to strive ahead and hope to build their farm back to the profit-making business that it once was. Success and failure comes with blazing a new trail and a new industry in the Midwest. Over the years, they have grown as entrepreneurs, and they have become experts in their field. They have also learned to trust and rely on each other.
He's been so supportive. I mean, he's up there working when it's 90 degrees, sweating like crazy, weeding and tilling. And so he's been very supportive. He's also been the one to bring me back to reality at times. The level head, maybe the one with more of a financial consideration, or mine's an all heart consideration. And so it's a pretty good blend, and I definitely couldn't do it without him.
To watch Mary do her presentations and answer questions, and the way she's conducted herself, she's and I hope she doesn't see this, but I'm just so proud of her, the way she's responded, and I've pretty much have said, you got to do this, and this is your baby, and I'll help you, and she has just come just miles and miles as far as a confident person.
For Mary, it all goes back to that vacation in 2005, where she fell in love with the lavender fields of Washington and wanted to bring that dream back home to Iowa.
I just envision that whole valley being full of lavender. And you see the pictures from France of the acres and acres of lavender. And I guess maybe seeing that several years of a beautiful field, just even the small field, there was like 1,200 plants. I want to see that whole valley in purple.